Welcome to Series 2 of the Productivity for Profit podcast. In this second series, we'll be talking about the mindset behind being productive. Knowing the tools and techniques that increase and maintain our effectiveness are so valuable, and it's our mindset that determines just how powerful they are. So I'm bringing in some very special guests to discuss an array of mindset topics, from how we speak to ourselves, our money mindset, holistic therapies, vibrational energy, and more, so that we can maximize our favourite techniques and take our productivity to a new level. When we start our entrepreneurial adventure, we have a clear vision of what we want to do, of how we see our future business. We're driven and full of optimism and purpose. It's a new and exciting chapter. There's a lot to build and plan through those initial years of business. We can become overwhelmed and procrastinate. We may lose focus and direction as we try to navigate the ups and downs and through the sheer volume of choices open to us. It's not unusual and completely understandable. Building and growing a business is not always straightforward. And as a solo business owner, we have a lot of different hats to wear. It's no wonder that initial clarity can change into a loss of direction and uncertainty. So how do we regain the clarity so that we can get back on track and see our business thrive? That's what we're talking about today. And my special guest, Nic Pendregaust, is here to help us unravel this complex issue. Nic is a qualified hypnotherapist and counsellor with an Advanced Diploma in Psychotherapeutic Counselling. With experience in working with children, teens, adults, couples and elderly, she's worked with clients from age 8 to 83. Nic works with clients in the areas of stress and anxiety, trauma, shame, guilt, relationships with food, narcissism, relationships, grief and loss, confidence and self-esteem, as well as introducing therapy in perimenopause and menopause. Her beautiful business, Clarity Kent, was born 5 years ago. Welcome to the Productivity for Profit podcast, Nic.
Yes, good morning. And really good to be here. Really looking forward to it, Libby.
So, what made you transition from the world of HR to becoming a therapist and creating your business?
It's a really good question. And I think looking back, I did that nearly 6 years ago now. So just wanted a complete change. If I'm honest, Libby, when I look back now, I was probably at that phase of burnout. I'd been in corporate world for 23 years, so it was time for change. And I wanted to do something really, really different. And I guess having been in the world of HR, in the world of coaching and mentoring, actually counselling felt like a sort of a natural move, a natural progression to continue to support others around me. But it was time for a change and to do something different. And I couldn't keep up with that busyness.
We're going to be talking about that today, and I can completely understand the burnout. So I've talked about this before on the podcast. I lost my voice for 3 months and had no clue why. And it ended up just being burnout. It creeps up on you, doesn't it? And it's easy to see it in hindsight and to look back and realise what was happening. But at the time, you're often just not aware.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come on to this when we talk about it later, as I think I was very much that be perfect, be busy, keep going. You know, I had all of those kind of drivers. And actually, when I got to my mid-40s, it was time to actually take stock and listen to my body and understand what my body was telling me to actually slow down and to do something different. But with that brought, exciting opportunities and new experiences too in running my own business.
Yes, if we didn't make that transition, we just wouldn't know this wonderful world that we've entered into. So today we're exploring how we can maintain focus on what really matters. But it's not always easy. And as an entrepreneur yourself, Nic, you can understand that timeline from the excitement and positivity of becoming a business owner through the experience of setting it all up and the decisions about which products and services to offer, who you want to work with, niching, learning about marketing, all that stuff that we need to do. There are so many things to think about. And it's a lot more involved than we realise when we start. So over time, it's easy to find yourself going down a rabbit hole and in a different direction to the one that you initially set out on. And there's a number of causes of that transition from complete clarity to somewhat confusion. How does that manifest, and what are the signs that we're veering away from our big vision?
It's a really good question. I think I can really relate to this and have a lot of experience that I can share today. So the first thing that came to mind for me was being able to tune in and listen to that, what we call our noisy inner critic, what it's actually telling us, from anything to what I call the sort of label loving, when we're telling ourselves we can't do things, we're an idiot, we're stupid, we're unable to do certain things. We're worried what other people are going to think about us as well, or we're trying to mind read what they might think. Here's us wanting to become an entrepreneur, wanting to shift and change our business. And I think with that critical voice as well is we can find ourselves in a position where we're doing a lot of catastrophizing, thinking about the what ifs. What if this doesn't take off? What am I going to do instead? And I think there's a lot to do with the shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And I think what we end up in is having that lack of focus. We're really overwhelmed. We've got so much on the go, so much we think we should be doing. And we end up with that real scattergun effect. But I think in doing that, Libby, it really keeps us stuck. And we end up in that sort of not fight, flight, but freeze cycle where we don't really know what to do. And that's when we become really de-energized. The lack of motivation comes in. And then we find ourselves veering away from that vision because we begin to procrastinate. We make excuses. Motivation drops off and we're distracted too from where we really want to go in our business.
It's a lot about how we speak to ourselves, isn't it? We are our own worst critic. And also we've spent a lot of our early years trying to meet other people's expectations. So it's very difficult to stop doing that. It's almost our default setting. And again, we've talked about this in other episodes where there's that programming that kicks in so fast, all this learned behavior and all these learned beliefs and these emotions that are tied to those beliefs, that they kick in so fast because they are programmed rather than conscious thought. We just slip into the same habits all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I always, when I work with my clients as well, is being able to firstly sort of tune into and notice and acknowledge that critical voice is coming up and being very in tune with what we are telling ourselves. It's a CBT technique I often use: catch it, check it, change it. So you can actually tune and say, no, hang on a minute. This is my, inner caveman or my critical voice, just sort of ramping up. And what can I do? So as I say in my work with clients is to kind of befriend it and talk nicely to it. So what we're bringing in there is kindness and compassion towards ourselves to help quieten that critical voice, because then, as you say, those beliefs come into play and it just keeps us stuck, and it puts incredible pressure on ourselves that actually puts us in that freeze state and doesn't enable us to move on and really enjoy that experience of really developing and cultivating our business.
And that comparisonitis that we have when we are seeing the world around us and we're seeing what people are doing. And as you were talking about that language, I must do this, I should do this, instead of I want to do this, or I could do this, I get to do this. That language that we use is so important, and it has such a profound effect on how we feel. So what can we do about that language? What you were saying was about noticing. I guess that's the first point, where we hear our language because it's on autopilot. We're not always hearing the words that we're using. So I guess it's about making conscious decisions about what to replace those words with.
I always describe it as being, as you said, able to catch it and check in on it, but really to press pause. And it's almost thinking about sort of as I describe it, pulling on the emergency handbrake to say, oh, hang on a minute. My critical voice is really ramping up here. What do I need to do just to quieten it down? And as you said, it is that language about the shoulda, coulda. That's when affirmations can come in, which are really great to say, no, I can, I will, and I'm going to, which just helps to gradually release any tension or pressure. And as you said, it kind of alleviates that, as I call it, comparisonitis, comparing ourselves to others. Because the best thing we can do is to put ourselves in the space of actually comparing ourselves to how we were maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, which puts us in the space of understanding, okay, so what have I achieved? What have I done in the last 2, 3, 4 years, or even longer, which puts us in a positive frame of mind and helps that positive reframing. So I always talk to my clients about, rather than being a place of judgment or blame when here I go again, that critical voice is to say, no, I'm going to be curious here. What's their game? What's that voice up to? How are they trying to make me feel? And actually, no, I'm going to stand up to the bully, if you like. I'm going to befriend it and say, no, I'm choosing not to listen to you because I've got this. I am, I can, and I will.
Yeah, absolutely. That language is just so powerful. And when we see people online, people that we know, we're always thinking of how far ahead of us they are. And yet, if we reflect on where they are, that's not where we want to be. We have our own path, but all of a sudden we've lost that direction. We've got this pathway, this straight pathway from where we are to where we want to be. Suddenly we take a fork in the road in their direction. And we think that we want to have what they've got, but that was not what we set out to do. And it's so counterintuitive to take pause, isn't it? When you are busy, in that busyness trap, it's so counterintuitive to take pause because we think that we're losing time. We're very caught up in the passing of time. And if we want to reach a goal, we've just got to be on the go, 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 go.
I always describe something to my clients, which is not buying a ticket to the circus. Now that might sound a bit odd, but it's saying, actually, I'm choosing not to play into the drama, or potentially the drama that's going on for everybody else and what they're doing, to say, I can sit in the audience and observe what's going on, but I'm not going to join in. I'm not going to be part of that and then feel persecuted for what I'm doing or not doing, or feeling that I've got to rescue myself because they're doing that, so I've got to do that. And then it kind of considers, it leaves us feeling stuck and being in that kind of victim space to say, oh, well, how come they're doing it, but I'm not? But as you said, Libby, we have to remain focused on what our direction is and what feels good for us. Undoubtedly, we want to have fun in our business.
Sometimes we forget that it's okay to have fun and that it's possible to have fun. Sometimes this impression is that in the early years, we've got to work so incredibly hard and then we've got to get through the tough spot to get to the good place. But then that's always putting it off and saying, well, when I've done this, then I can have this. When I've done this, this is going to be possible. But we don't always have to wait, do we? We can actually live in the here and now and start to live as if we're already there.
Yeah, exactly. Because I talk about that sort of, if you like, visualization is stepping into, albeit you're not there yet, but stepping into the place of where you like to be. So you can visualize it, you can experience it. And that really helps us, to gain momentum and to help propel and move ourselves forward, to say, given where you want to go, how do you want to think? How do you want to feel? How do you want to behave? That's the place to sort of stay in and be grounded by, to help us think about where we want to be.
I often talk about how do you want to feel, because that's ultimately what we want, isn't it? Yes, we can have all the material things, but the material things we want bring emotions, and everything is tied to emotions. So if we want a certain lifestyle, or we want to have time freedom, or we want something for our children, it's always comes back to how do we want to feel? And if we can create the feeling in our business, how that manifests may not be how we think it's going to. But if we concentrate on those emotions and how we want to feel in our business and working with our clients, and that feeling of euphoria or accomplishment or whatever it is we want to feel, those positive feelings, that may come from some quite surprising directions. But if we follow the feeling, it could open up all sorts of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we find ourselves in that space of comparisonitis, as you say, Libby, it's again, noticing and being curious about what effect does that have on our emotional well-being. So if we are losing that focus, it's tuning in to say, no, actually, this is making me feel overwhelmed. This is making me feel tired. This is really de-energizing me. And in my work, I talk a lot, particularly about how the body keeps score. So it's tuning in and noticing those physical sensations, how it sort of not only mentally manifests itself, but physically in our body as well. So I'm talking about the burnout, the fatigue, the pain, the digestive issues, the cravings, the headaches, to say, no, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel right. What's going on here? Not what's wrong with me, but what's happening to me that's leading me to feel this way. And that's when we can really check in and change that to get us back on that journey of being really excited and energized about our business, when we can acknowledge and accept really what's going on and how it's making us feel.
So a lot of people we're talking about this, we mentioned busyness. A lot of people will hide behind their laptop, working those long hours, beavering away to the point of burnout, without acknowledging that they're not actually having an impact on the world, because we start our businesses because we want to affect the world. We want to make change. And so if they're not having that impact and they're not seeing that growth that they know in their hearts they're totally capable of achieving, because we all know we have potential, and it's not easy in your own business. You're not fitting into a structure as you are in the corporate world. You don't have a role. You're not answerable to anybody. So it is very challenging. No getting away from that. But their potential's stifled because they're just working harder and harder and thinking that hard work is the key, almost hiding behind it. But it's very hard to be visible and to stay focused and on track if you're hidden away, working behind the scenes, and busyness is your motivator, not substance, as it were. So how do we find these amazing, talented people if they're hidden away? How do they make sales when they're not visible? So how do people fall into this busyness trap? It's that perfectionism, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a few thoughts, a number of thoughts actually around that. I think there's something about expectations from others. I talk a bit about the sort of family blueprint. So again, how we've grown up, there can be an aspect of cultural conditioning. We've picked up and heard expectations for others, and then they become our own beliefs. It's that be busy, work hard, play hard, be perfect. And actually, I often say to clients, what does being perfect look like? And sort of challenging a belief that for one reason or other has become embedded in our mind, and actually acknowledging, as you said, Lily, where does that get us? It kind of ends up as sort of spinning around on our heels and trying to achieve something, but we're not really that sure what be perfect is all about. And I think we then fall into that trap of guilt tripping ourselves and judging ourselves for, but are actually unable to get out of that cycle.
And often that perfectionism, that line or this impression of what perfect is, and perfect is completely subjective, because to me, perfect is not what perfect is to you, for example. So really there's no such thing as perfection. But when we have this impression of perfection and we get closer, we just keep pushing the boundaries out, don't we? We just keep pushing that line out. So we're never going to reach it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, well, when this happens, what next? As you said, the goalposts kind of keep moving, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what actually then does success look like if the goalpost keeps moving? And then with that, again, what impact it's having on us, both physically, emotionally and mentally as well, because it's not something we can sustain if we have no real idea about what the goal that we're actually setting ourselves is about. And we're continue to sit with that. Well, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And it's not a case of anything being wrong with you. It's acknowledging what's happening to me here and what can I do differently to kind of move myself out of that cycle.
It's all tied into our self-worth, isn't it? And I know that this is something that I've struggled with. And it's not about blame. Sometimes we hear things and we reflect them onto ourselves. They were never intended for that purpose. Or the way that we bring up our own children, it will affect them as they get older. So it is something that is no one's fault. And often it comes from a place of love and wanting to protect you. As a child, people are constantly wanting to protect you, to teach you. It could be the education system. It can come from all sorts of different directions. And it's not about blame, but sometimes just knowing where it came from and acknowledging it and giving it credit, because sometimes we say, well, why on earth would that affect me now? I was 5 when that happened, and it was such a silly little thing, but it happened to the 5-year-old, not to the 40, 50, 60-year-old. So actually it was so impactful and did shape the person you were today. And yes, it looks very trivial. It just shows how some of these things that on the scheme of things seem silly, they're not. And we have to take them seriously. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to deal with them and overcome them, move past them.
Yeah, I always talk a lot in my counselling work about our inner child, and our inner child never leaves us. It's always part of us. But as you said, Libby, being able to notice and tune into our experiences, maybe where those expectations came from, those beliefs came from. And I heard a wonderful phrase recently from a psychotherapist on television, Mandy Salgari, who said, our parents, our family are not on trial here. But if we can seek to understand where those things come from, then we can be respectful to that child, bring him or her alongside us, but say, no, actually, we're the adult now. And a word I use a lot in my work is choice. I can now choose differently. So I can choose to have a different attitude, a different belief. You know, it served me well to a point, but now I'm choosing differently. I can have those different attitudes, different work habits, different work-life balance. It's there for me to take.
Because we don't have to continue to be a victim to it, do we? I think when we label ourselves. So, for example, I've talked again about this a lot, about the fact I was always the ditzy one, I was the silly one. Whether anybody else actually thought that, but that was what I thought other people thought of me. And you label yourself, don't you? But once you understand what those labels are, you don't need to keep hanging them around your neck. You can change those labels. You can decide that actually, I know I'm not that person. No one else is saying that I am. In fact, your family or whoever don't even remember this being an issue. So it's about changing those labels. But the only person who can really do that is us. And when we look inside ourselves, we know who we are. When we're so quick to notice the negative over the positive, we'll call ourselves ditzy or a procrastinator, whereas actually we're kind, we're compassionate, we're all these lovely things, you know, all these positive attributes to our personalities. We default to focusing on the negative. It shouts at us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it draws us in. It's the bully that wants to kind of preoccupy our mind. And, you know, the words I am, if you like, what follows those two words is so powerful. I am strong. I am resilient. I am kind.
And again, it's the power of the words, little words that we just overlook and don't even realize we're using. But they hold so much power over us.
And it is about that pausing and checking in. And it takes time. It's not a quick fix, but in that noticing more and more kind of aware to say, no, hang on a minute. That's my inner critic talking. I'm going to choose to change this. So I'm not that, I'm this. And that constant reaffirming that helps to keep us grounded, and that positive talk rather than switching off that sort of negative chit chat.
And again, that brings us back round to being clearer on our vision, doesn't it? When we have been drawn off track, perhaps we've allowed ourselves to be influenced by the noise out there. Remembering that positivity and our strengths again brings us and strengthens us. That positivity brings back our inner strength so we can get back on track, refocus on what perhaps we veered away from, our original vision, and also to reassess and say, well, yes, I have come so far. Is my vision still the same? Am I still on track? And to refocus, because it's not something that stays static. It's something that evolves over time as we grow as people, as our businesses grow. Our initial vision is often, probably more often than not, is not the vision that we have 5 years into our business. There's an evolution to it. The right evolution will come when we keep refocusing and keep reassessing.
And I think you mentioned it earlier, it does feel counterintuitive because we have that sense of, I've got to keep busy, I've got to keep pushing forward, it's got to be go, go, go. But actually, in reality, if we can press pause, as you say, and refocus, and actually turn to self-care and what our non-negotiables are for our self-care, then actually we can then increase our productivity just by taking some momentary pauses to think, hang on a minute, what's happening here? What's going on for me? Rather than what's wrong with me, what's happening for me here to get us back on track with our business.
Yeah, because I often say that productivity is not busyness, it's not doing. Sometimes it can be not doing. Productivity, or the most productive thing you can be doing, is the right thing at the right time. And that could be anything. It could be taking time out. It could be doing a really full-on project. It could be spending some time on self-development. It could be taking a walk and giving yourself the space and the environment to see the bird's eye view because you're so caught up in the minutiae. So there's no one way to be productive. For me, it's doing the right thing at the right time for where you are and for you.
I often say to clients as well, when we get into that place of overwhelm, is to say, let's just stop for a minute and say, what does my soul crave right now? What do I need to do just to step away, if you like, from the drama, allow the circus to play out? And as you said, Libby, it could be going for a walk, it could be jumping in the bath in the middle of the afternoon, whatever works for us. It could be doing something completely different. Maybe even something out of our comfort zone, but just to take some time away, to refocus, to help increase our productivity and to re-energize ourselves.
Yes, so important to have that, not just levels of energy, but the right energy, that positive, confident, excited energy. Because energy can present itself in so many ways, can't it? But it's about having that curiosity, all of those energies, because we are energetic beings. We are, for every cell in our bodies has a charge to it, is energy. We say that we only use a certain percentage of the brain. So over evolution, our brains have expanded, but we only use a certain amount of our brains. And I feel the same about the energy we have. And I'm not talking about your feeling energetic, but just the potential inside you as energy. I think there's so much of that potential that we're not tapping into because of some of the things we've talked about today, like perfectionism, like overwhelm, like comparisonitis, and it's squashing our potential. And I believe that we have so much more inside us, but we need to be in the right conditions be able to access and use that potential energy. And some of the things you've talked about today will allow us to be in the right conditions to release more of that potential. So when we recognize the signs that we've been talking about in ourselves, and we want to stop this escalation of overwork and underperformance or not getting results that we believe we're capable of and are totally capable of, how do we step back? We talked about stepping back, but we want to regain control. We want to regain that clarity of what we want our future to look like so that we can develop as people and as our business. So we've talked about taking a pause, but are there any exercises, things that people could actually do, something that you would recommend that people perhaps write or do that's a proactive action? Because we can take pause, but then what? What could they do to regain that clarity?
There's a number of things that I would suggest, but I wanted to play to your recent point, really, which is to say, is to remember that we're human beings, not human doings. So how can we be rather than do all the time? So when I work with clients, the first place I go to is self-care. So what are the self-care non-negotiables? And when I talk about non-negotiables is to say, what could be a number of things that you could do every day as a structure to your day to give you some time out from your business. So to your point, that could be journaling, whether it's writing prose, if you like, or just doing some bullets, recording a voice note, in our phone to ourselves. But for me, it's about allowing ourselves to get any thoughts, feelings, worries, to allow them to either hit the air if we're recording a voice note or to get them down on paper. I think that really helps to kind of quieten our minds. So that's one technique that I would really suggest. The other thing that I'm a big fan of is mindfulness and meditation. Whether you do that at the beginning of the day, lunchtime, in the evening, that's something to consider. But it is very much about exercises we can do to help notice our thoughts, feelings, and our behaviours come to that, and to be able to get them out, whether it's documenting them, whether it's speaking them, to then help reframe our language that we talked about, what we can tell ourselves in the future.
Yes, because getting it out on paper, we will notice when we start to use that language that's harsh or self-critical, won't we? One thing that I found very useful is to just write a question at the top of the page, like, how am I feeling today? Or what do I want to achieve today? And then just free writing. So just answering that question, but not really thinking about it. And it can take me off on a tangent, but it's, like you say, it's getting it out from our heads. Our heads are so cluttered. Our time is cluttered. Our heads are cluttered. Our minds are cluttered. So getting that out really helps to take off the pressure and to understand our thoughts and to question them too, isn't it? Because sometimes those thoughts that are whizzing around in our heads, when we put them down on paper and we question them, we realise that they're not truth.
It's getting out of our heads, and quite often I talk about that sort of ticker tape that's going around our head and what can we do to step off it. It is very powerful to take that time out to get your thoughts down on paper or to record them. But you don't have to, in the moment, start reviewing them, if you like, or even critiquing them, because that's when the inner critic comes back in. Leave them there. Sit in that kind of power that you've let them out, and maybe come back to them later in the day. See if they hold the same kind of worry, the same kind of power. Because then I think you're giving yourself time as a break to notice and notice differently, to say, again, the curiosity, gosh, I wonder what that was all about at the time, because it doesn't hold the same power. But also what we can do in that is to see any patterns, any themes emerging with our thinking.
I really like that. I like that space to come back and review. Because often when we're writing, we think that we're pouring out these negative feelings, but we look back and we can look at with curiosity. And sometimes we actually see the positives in there. We don't see them as critical or negative to ourselves. We just see them as interesting, or they may give clues to something. So they don't always read the same later, as you say. than they do when they're in our heads. They sound different on paper than they do in our heads. So that's really interesting. And I've done that. I was doing my gratitude journal over Christmas kind of got into a bit of a funk. I don't know if it's because I knew it was the end of the year and I was winding down. I was doing a lot of gratitude journaling, and looking back on it is very intriguing and it creates that curiosity as to, wow, that's interesting to see it on paper and not just have it in this muddle in my head. It's almost unraveling it when you put it on paper.
And I describe it as we're unpicking our thoughts, aren't we? Our thoughts, feelings and emotions. We've got this almost like this picture of this sort of ball of wool in our head. And actually that's what I describe to potential clients, as the therapist, are helping people unpick their thoughts to a point. So yeah, it is about get out of our heads.
Interesting, actually, because that's exactly the analogy I use, is the ball of wool. You've got this massive ball of wool and you're just bringing it out and sort of making it into just one long line, and it's just unraveling it and being able to think about it logically rather than this mess, this muddle in our heads. So yes, it's a good analogy to use. Nic, that has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Any thoughts to leave us with?
I think one of the thoughts that I had, just following on from what we were just saying, is words that I love to use is notice, be curious. There's always choice, but to play detective with our thoughts, feelings, emotions as well. So no blame, no judgment, to say, what's going on here? What's going on for me?
Yeah, that's far more useful than beating ourselves down, isn't it? And it frees us up to be more focused and to make the progress that we want to make. And slowing down is often the point that will actually speed us up. Not because I'm suddenly going to fast drive, but it's a natural consequence.
And I think it frees us up to be unique, to be a human being, and to be authentic as well, to stand true to who we are, rather than to be who we think others think we should be.
And that's when we become visible, isn't it? That's when people start to notice us, because we're not a cookie cutter therapist, consultant, mentor, coach, whatever it may be. We're not just talking in cliches and saying the same as everyone else. We're a real human being. Thank you, Nic. Thanks so much. So where can we find you and find out more about what you do?
So my website is clarity-kent.co.uk. I'm on Facebook as well as Clarity Kent Counselling, and on Instagram too, Clarity Kent.
Perfect. And we'll put all of those links into the show notes so that people can find you and find out more about what you do. And do you work one-to-one primarily?
I do work one-to-one, yes. Primarily, I've been working on Zoom during COVID, and I'm about to go back to doing some work face-to-face as well, locally. So that's exciting too.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Some amazing insights. We've covered a lot, but I think the overriding thought is that it's time to slow down and get back to thinking about how we want to feel. What we want to achieve. It's all about how we want to feel, isn't it? And that will be our guide. But we need to slow down and stop being so self-critical.
Absolutely. Thanks, Libby.
Thanks, Nic. And I'll see you all on the next episode of the Productivity for Profit podcast. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Productivity for Profit podcast. Why not join my free Facebook group, Productivity for Profit, for more tips, tools and support on your journey to mastering your productivity and time management. If you've enjoyed the podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. If you're juggling the demands of a service-based business helping your clients and all the other demands of life, then you're probably feeling pretty short of time. So this is just for you. I have a brand new course that helps you to save a minimum of an hour every day. And what would you do with that extra hour? And how would that accumulate over a year? Would you make more money? Would you be more present with your family? Would you have more me time and prevent the burnout? Whatever you choose to do with that extra hour a day, we know that it's not just about what you do, but how you think. So this course is going to start with those quick wins of gaining you back some time, plugging the leaks, putting in the boundaries, but it's also going to help you to instill new beliefs that will allow you to make different choices. Because this is not just about quick wins, as good as they are, it's about long-term change and changing your life. So if this is something that you would like to know more about, then have a look in the show notes and find the link to the Save an Hour Every Day course.